Thank you, Ellen. All right, everybody, welcome to the Planning Board meeting for Monday, May the 2nd. There are 2 items on the agenda, and we're going to start right away. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? See none. Can I have an approval of the agenda?
Could I just add something on the agenda? It's more information. It's about the development at Hidden Valley. I know it's an operational issue. Hidden Valley is out off Lower Malpac Road. And then there's also Montgomery Heights that's off St. Peter's Road. Just want to get a little more information on it.
Okay. That's any issues with adding that item to the agenda?
Do I need to step out for Montgomery?
When it comes up?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, that'll be great. Okay, that's added, sure. So with the amendment to the agenda, can I get someone to move to approve it? Councillor Yankow, seconded by Chris. I'm going to ask for an adoption of our minutes from Planning Board on April 4th. Moved by His Worship, seconded by Bobby. Thank you. Any business arising from those minutes? I'm not seeing any. We're going to move right into reports, and Jennifer's here to talk about 18 Bishop Street.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm presenting item 6.A.1. This application is a site-specific exemption to accommodate a 4-story single detached dwelling at the proposed 18 Bishop Street. The site is vacant and has historically only served as one parking space for the adjacent lot to the east. So this image on the right is what it looks like today. And on the left, you can see how it's previously served. The site is located just off University Avenue and just north of the 500 lot area. The area is zoned R2 with some MCU further to the left here. The site is extremely undersized at 0.04 acres. It has a street frontage of 22.5 feet and a depth of 51.5 feet, which creates great development constraints. The site is currently addressed 20 Bishop, same as the adjacent lot, which also has the same PID. The 2 lots were considered one parcel by the city, as there was no record of subdivision. However, after approval of the addition on the adjacent lot, which would happen through the major variance process, a survey plan was provided by the applicant, which was produced by Morris Geometrics, which indicated the 2 lots were in fact separate parcels. These images are showing the street context looking east and west on Bishop. And the neighborhood is developed primarily with 1.5 to 2-story single detached and semis, with adjacent parking in the driveway, as well as no parking at all for those across the street. The application is proposing a 4-story single detached dwelling at approximately 39 feet in height. It includes a rooftop deck with solar panels, a front drive garage, and a 3rd floor patio on the front facade. The main door is actually located on the side, so that's the access for the house. This is the rear facade. You can see the rooftop patio, also Juliet balconies on floors 1, 2, and 3, and also a 3rd rear patio area here. This is the proposed site plan. It's proposing a parking right-of-way for that adjacent lot, which is this portion here, as well as the front drive garage for the subject site. So this right-of-way isn't acknowledged by the bylaw. It is considered off-site parking for the adjacent lot, which the bylaw doesn't allow. The application is proposing a 2-foot side yard and a 6-foot rear yard setback. And this front drive garage with the right-of-way for parking would result in a curb cut basically the length of the entire parcel. This table is showing the bylaw deficiencies. So as I stated, the lot is extremely undersized, coming in at about 1/5 of the lot area for a single detached dwelling and half of the lot frontage that we would typically see. And so as a result, the development as proposed is seeking an exemption for the east and west side yards and the rear setback, and then also the max height. So in summary, the positives with this application would be that it is a new dwelling unit and it is inner city, so it is utilizing existing services. However, the shortcomings would be the 6 bylaw deficiencies. It would set a negative precedent for redevelopment. It does not align with the bylaw, nor does it align with the official plan. It does have an adverse effect on this adjacent lot, taking away the parking. And the safety concerns with the proposed front drive, having that vehicular and pedestrian interaction with minimum setback. It is out of character for the surrounding neighborhood, and it would be adding further constraint to the street. So for these reasons and those reasons outlined in your report, staff is not supporting the application and recommending denying it proceeding to public consultation.
Thank you for your report, John. Is there any, I know the applicant's here and he'll want to come in and speak to us, but is there any questions for Jennifer before we invite the applicant in? Yes, Councillor Yankoff?
Thank you, Jen, for your report. So you are, I see here in conclusion, not recommending, recommending the council to deny the request to proceed to public consultation on this. Were they given, what can they do as of right without, what are their options to, what can they do in that tiny lot?
I mean, as of right, they have the right to apply.
No, but an as of right build, like what could they build without needing any type of variances from the city?
Sure.
Maybe I'll jump in on that.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
Typically what the bylaw indicates on an undersized lot that doesn't meet the dimensions and frontage, that the intent is that whatever, you should have the right to build on it, but you should be also able to meet the other zone standards, right? You shouldn't need variances, but, and things like that. But, and again, you shouldn't try to maximize how much you can get on that lot. I mean, if you get something on the lot, because the reality is it is an undersized lot. The tricky thing on this one is that because of the previous application that came in, and they did expand on the previous lot, but the parking for the previous lot was accepted to be on this lot because at that time it was thought to be just one property. So the parking, so that is going to compound the lot next door in regard to its parking if this is approved as well. So you're not only affecting one property, you'll be affecting the parking on the adjacent property as well.
And same owner for both properties?
Exactly, right. And so we, at the time, we just didn't have all of this information when we dealt with the major variance for the first property. We just assumed it was one lot for the 2 lots that turned into be, the 1 lot which turned into be 2 lots. So they don't really, if we allow this one to develop, there wouldn't be the required parking for the adjacent lot because we accepted that in a previous application for the major variance that occurred to allow some additional development on that lot.
And so during this process, they brought forward an old survey that indicated that it was 2?
It was in between, yeah. So after the approval of the addition onto this one, we received a survey showing that it was in fact 2 parcels. So it was after approval of this addition, but it was prior to this application.
And the survey was provided by the actual applicant himself?
Yeah, the applicant / landowner, yeah.
Did the
Sorry, he
landowner?
didn't create it. Yeah, Morris Geomatics,
Yeah.
thank you.
Was he aware that it was,
We wouldn't know for sure.
well, he's here, so that's a good question.
It
Maybe
is
we
a
can
good
ask him.
question, because this seems like a very peculiar situation.
And the other tricky thing is that you're not allowed to, I think he's going to propose that you provide the parking for the adjacent property, either on this property, but the bylaw doesn't allow for the off-site parking. It's got to be on the lot, and that would make sense for a single-family dwelling. It should be on the lot in question. So, in answer to your question, I think the reality is that both lots should be working in tandem with the lot that they got the major variance on, and that the parking, you know, it should be consolidated together to form one lot, in my opinion, but I'm certain the applicant will have a very different view of that, and by all means hear him out when he comes in.
Is there any other questions for Jen? Rosemary?
I was just wondering about the height. It's 4 stories. So how much does it exceed the height that is allowed?
Right. So the height allowed is 11, and I'm saying it's approximately 12.
What's that?
So what is permitted is 11, and what is proposed is approximately 12. So
Meters.
approximately
Meters,
Yeah.
meters,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, so 1 meter over. That actual height calculation wasn't actually provided by the applicant, though. He had only provided the height up till the 3rd story.
Oh, so, but you have 4.
But the application is for 4. I keep going there. Yeah, so I had, the application had a measurement here, but there's the 4th.
And that 3rd floor is still a meter over?
4th,
Or the 4th floor brings
Yeah.
it to a meter, okay.
which requires variance too.
That's in there, yeah. That's one of
variance,
the
yeah.
6,
Okay.
yeah.
And the reason it's here as a site-specific amendment is there's multiple variances. At a certain point, you get so many variances going on, and it's typically, you know, you look at one variance for a property, you might look at a secondary one, but how many variances are there on this?
6.
6 exemptions.
Right, so that's why it's a much more robust process, and that's what the site-specific amendment, it speaks to that. When you get multiple variances going, should be dealt with that reason.
Yeah. We also get into onlooking issues and privacy issues whenever we get to this kind of height as well, so it's not just strictly the number that is the issue. It's
Yeah.
the impact on adjacent lots.
Chris?
Chair, you kind of lost me there. So the 3rd floor is 1 meter above what we're allowed, or the 4th?
The application.
The 4th floor, the
Yeah.
whole application, okay.
But his plan, I believe, Jen, just showed to the 3rd floor,
The measurement was only went
Yeah.
to the 3rd floor.
but it's actually another,
I just wanted to clarify that because it isn't the applicant's math, it is my math that I'm saying it's approximately 12 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
In addition, Madam Chair, to it being out of whack with the streetscape, wouldn't parking be a major problem too? Like, that street is very narrow, and getting in and out of that garage, I was up to have a look at the site, and it doesn't give you much room to,
Bishop's a horseshoe, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, those garages right on the street, that they can meet the definition in the bylaw of, you know, of required space. But let's face it, they're not going to be utilized in the summer months. Somebody could use it every day, but I suspect that it would be used a lot, you know, not as often as, you know, parking in the street, because it's going to be just more convenient. It's hard to get in and out of those structures that are, you know, really tight like that. But again, I can't control whether it meets the definition of the bylaw, that type of garage, but you are backing out of them, which is a
Yeah.
bit of a concern.
Yeah, it's a small site.
Safety, yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
Can I see the picture of the design again?
This is the front facade.
with the ground level parking.
Yeah, so this is the front yard garage for this building, and then this little cutout would be a surface stall that he's proposing for 20 Bishop, like for that adjacent original lot. Because currently this entire site provided the parking for,
For the adjacent
20.
property.
yeah, they're both 20 Bishop.
And was it just enough parking when it was just one?
Yeah, so 20 Bishop would require 1 parking stall, which was accommodated on this site.
Okay.
And the addition that was approved last summer was based on the parking being on this site, because at the time it was considered 1 parcel by the city.
Gotcha.
Then we got the survey showing it's 2 different parcels, and now he's proposing to keep a right-of-way to keep this parking for the adjacent site, and then develop the entire lot.
To another single family.
That's right.
Yeah. So Madam Chair, if I just finish off.
Yes.
So Jen, I know on the corner of Bishop and University, there's a 3-story apartment building, maybe 4.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, the MUC over here?
No, it faces right on the University of
Yeah,
Oh,
that-
okay, sorry, this
Yeah.
one, okay.
So in terms of height, this building would not be, it would be out of, it wouldn't be harmonious with Bishop Street, but in the area, it would fit, I think, close to what's already there, what's existing. No, just,
If you zoom out further, I could see that, like, if you're taking into consideration the apartment buildings that block end
Right.
block, but in terms of the street context, it is significantly higher.
okay, so let's say if he wanted to make this work, could he amalgamate the two amalgamate or rezone the two properties and bring them in as one and then build? Or still, are you,
It would, if he were to consolidate the lots, I think he would still struggle with lot
Parking.
area because it is significantly undersized. Yeah, parking is going to be an issue, and it would be just a mid-block rezoning, and I'm not sure it would be appropriate to put any higher density.
I think you're only allowed one main building on a lot, so that would be two main buildings on a consolidated lot. So-
You have an as of right to do an in-law suite, attach it that way.
yeah, I'm just trying to find out, Madam Chair, like, whatever way we jig it, the developer's not gonna be able to do anything going up 4 stories. That's what you're saying, correct?
That's what she's recommending.
That's what I'm saying. That's what you recommended, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and, yeah, if we're looking at different zones, then that wasn't what was reviewed.
Thank you. And Councillor Yankoff?
So if this lot does get to be its own lot, because
Yeah.
we found out
It is,
later,
yeah.
after he did all the other work, whether he knew before or not, we'll find that out when he comes in. What actually could you build there?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like,
That's
what
what-
would you build, like a teeny tiny house?
No, as per the bylaw, there is a minimum width requirement, which I believe is 17 feet. Do you know?
17 feet in the rear yard?
No, that's
No,
supposed to be
width.
70 feet wide, and it's only
Width,
like a
a single
22-foot wide lot, it's a really tiny lot.
Yeah.
So they'd have to build a teeny tiny house.
You know, again, I mean, it's one of those things, you have certain development rights, but he's so constrained on the size of that lot. If he was to do anything, he should likely consolidate it back in with the other building, because he added to the end of the other building on the other lot, and that's, you know, he intensified the use of the other one, but indicated I've got the parking on this one. So that's, you know, and again, technically, I think that, you know, if you wanted to approve something on this lot, then you're going to have to do something with the other lot as well, because the parking cannot be accommodated on the other lot. So it's really, this is an application that's impacting 2 lots to accommodate 1 lot, this request here.
So because he owns both lots, even if he did have room on the other lot to accommodate the parking, he's not allowed to do that?
Well, he's got this outstanding issue, where does he provide the parking for the other lot?
He's already using this lot as his parking.
Right, oh my gosh.
It's pretty
Mercy.
confusing. Yeah. So, Madam Chair, second
Yes.
question.
Second
So,
question.
Jen, again, I'm just trying to get my head around the fact that he has these 2 properties.
Right.
And if we're talking about intensifying our accommodations or our uses in the downtown to address the affordable, accessible housing, this is not part of the plan? Is this outside of that, you know, density intensification?
I mean, as I had noted, it does have 2 benefits. It is adding
2 what?
2 benefits.
2 positives.
Yeah, 2 positives. It's adding an additional unit, and it is utilizing existing infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not doing so in a method that aligns with our bylaw or our official plan, though,
Or safety, by the sounds of it. There's safety concerns.
which is
Well,
part of
it's
that.
only a 1-lane street.
And there's no
Bishops.
parking.
Yeah, and the parking for some of the neighbors is up at the end of the street. They don't have parking. It's an old, Bishop is an old street. It's an old part of the city. Yeah. It's good for carts and horses, but not cars and trucks.
Well, in my 3 years, I've never seen where we don't even recommend to go to public
I
consultation.
know.
So to me, that's indicative that
Yeah.
it's concerning, but I don't think I've ever seen a denial to go
Well,
to a
if
public
it's up to
consultation.
the council, but it's just a matter of, It just depends on how likely you think of an approval is, and do you want to spend that time with the residents? Maybe you want to hear from the residents, entirely up to you.
Well, I think we should start with allowing, unless there's more questions for Jennifer. She's done a great job presenting their idea. We'll allow the applicant to come in and you can run and do your commitment, Jen. Thank you.
I'll get the applicant.
Okay.
We may have more questions first, but Alex could probably answer them afterwards.
I should be able to.
Okay.
Hope so. He's the manager.
What time is it? Because she only...
4:52.
Yeah, she needed to excuse herself for pick up her child after. It's funny, I thought it was one lot though, and then now it's
Well,
two.
it was such a tiny, it's tiny if it was consolidated.
Right.
Yes, so then, the fact that, this is kind of a technical issue, right? It's just that it proved, he may or may not even know himself. I mean,
So, Madam Chair, when did we give the major variance? It's not too long ago, right?
I'm not sure.
Last year.
It's in the last year. Yeah.
And it wasn't surveyed at that time to determine?
I think that was one of the conditions that they came in with the survey, and when the survey came in, this is what.
After we had the decision made?
Well, it was, they were supposed to clarify that issue, and they didn't come in and clarify it.
They were already building at the time we clarified.
Well, that's what happens, I guess. Hello, Mr. Petrie,
Thanks for having me.
welcome
Yes.
to the planning board.
Thank you.
You wanted to speak to the planning board?
Yes, yeah. Is it
You
okay
can
to
take
remove
your
my
mask off,
here?
yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. So I heard the last 2/3 of kind of the conversation happening before, but I couldn't catch the full audio. But I might start by just kind of giving a review of the plan here for 18 Bishop, and then I can I hear some of the questions, and I can address a few of those, and then of course take any questions at all. So the preamble to the story is that I bought 20 and 18 Bishop as 20 Bishop, as was mentioned last year, and had applied for a variance required to make an addition to 20 Bishop. And it was already of the opinion when I purchased the property and when I was here to request the variance last year that indeed the property was two properties, and I had mentioned it. I think the meeting at the time was shared. It was just forgetting her name here, but it was chaired by
Emily?
no, this
Okay.
yeah, and
No, that's me. I'm Councillor Julie.
what's that?
That's who I am, if you're pointing to my desk. I'm just chairing today's meeting.
No, yeah. Anyway, so I mentioned in the meeting that we were, because we had asked for zoning, we had presented a zoning inquiry, and Emily had said that we needed to provide a survey from a surveyor in order to be able to, because there was it was inconclusive. So I mentioned that at the meeting at the time, and we had already engaged David Morris to complete a survey, which is true. It was the results of that survey came out after the planning meeting. So the only thing I might address to that particular issue is that my building permit to complete the addition of 20 Bishop was not provided until I think it was October, and there was ample opportunity if indeed that there is some sort of special proviso that the vacant lot at 18 Bishop needed to require parking for 20 Bishop. The planning department could have made whatever was necessary before issuing that building permit to me. Sort of in light of that information coming up later, I suppose. But there was certainly nothing underhanded in that I expressed it at the time. It was my full intent, and I brought it up at the meeting that day that we wanted to develop at a future date 18 Bishop Street. So because there are two lots, it's my understanding that because there's nothing in the deed or any sort of requirement about it, that in fact 20 Bishop is a property that does not own any parking. It's true that Historically, both properties have been owned always by the same person, but because they're two separate properties, there's nothing sort of preventing me from selling 18 Bishop to the city or to anyone who would want to buy 18 Bishop. It's a separate lot, and there doesn't require any sort of to be any sort of limitations for 18 Bishop to provide a parking space were it to be sold to anyone to allow 20 Bishop to park. So practically speaking, it doesn't make any sense for me to not provide any parking for 20 Bishop because I happen to be the owner of 20 Bishop. I don't want it to end up being that way. So in my development plan, if you see the site plan, you see that I'm doing what I can to make a development of an infill lot or an older, like it was described as a very old street in Charlottetown lot work and still have off-street parking. So I'm providing a right-of-way in favor of 20 Bishop. 18 Bishop is providing the right-of-way to 20 Bishop to park a single-family or one single parking space, and then the plan for 18 Bishop is to have a garage. So it isn't because I believe it's technically required, it's just because it's the right thing to do. It wouldn't make sense to not sort of develop 18 Bishop without some sort of remedy to keep off-street parking for 20 Bishop. That's the reason I'm doing it. So I might just address a few of the things. So I guess there's sort of, it was addressed today that there's 6 items about what we plan to do that don't meet the bylaw. And if you refer to section 6.11 in the bylaw, there's a clause that says, notwithstanding any other requirements of this bylaw, a vacant lot shown on a deed as a separate lot from adjoining parcels on the effective date of this bylaw having less than the minimum frontage or lot area by this bylaw may be used for any purpose permitted in the zone in which the lot is located, provided that all other applicable provisions of this bylaw are satisfied. And where all applicable provisions of this bylaw cannot be satisfied, the development officer may apply procedures set out in this bylaw for the handling of variances to the minimum requirement rear yard, front yard, flankage yard, and side yard. So I bring that up only because there's a provision already in the bylaw for this sort of situation where there isn't sufficient lot area or frontage, meaning that they technically, in my reading of it, don't require major variances so long as the lot, or any sort of variance, so long as they exist prior to, the lot existed prior to 2018. So I don't believe them to be sort of items outside of the norm that the bylaw doesn't already handle. So as far as the height restriction, I haven't been able to have this discussion with you until right now, or not even a discussion, I'm only sort of hearing it. So the house that I'm proposing is 3 stories above grade, plus a basement. So the rooftop is a place to occupy solar panels and a small rooftop deck, because there's no way that I can build a proper deck in the front or the back or anywhere on this house, as it's too close to the boundary lines. So if you're counting, there's like a service entrance to the top. Perhaps is it the service entrance to the top that you're referring to? That sort of isn't it a calculation that pushes the number over the bylaw 36? I'm not really sure how we got it.
This is all my correspondence on the application, so we certainly have had a lot of back and forth. I do have a number of variations. And so it is on the 4th floor. And
when you say the 4th floor, do you mean the roof? Is that what you mean by the? I'm not sure what you're referring to as the 4th floor.
so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 floors.
Okay, so the roof, the little structure at the top there, the service entrance.
So that is a 4th floor on a residential building.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be like perhaps in a higher density building, it would be considered mechanical equipment, or if it was an elevator shaft, it could be deemed as such. But this is a stairwell going up to a 4th floor from which you then access the 3rd floor rooftop patio.
And is the height of that floor considered by the landing building? That's the height, like when you make the calculation, the height of that?
The height of the building goes from ground to top of the building.
Okay.
And you know, I think it's really important that planning board has an opportunity to ask you some questions and stuff about your original application, and then as far as the back and forth with planning around what's what
Yeah.
would be at another time, in my opinion, but no, we're not gonna get into looking at the actual, it's whether or not this application that's in front of us is going to go to a public meeting or not. And again, I know Jennifer has a commitment, so I guess if there's specific questions from our planning board based on the application that was presented to us from staffing right now. I mean, there's ways you can do this, Jason, if you want to defer the application and go back and be able to work with planning staff around some of your uncertainties. That's one option, correct, Alex?
Correct.
Or if you want to proceed with this particular application, that's your choice too.
So I guess the application itself, so like the side yard and the rear yard, I have no confusion. The height, there is some provision in the bylaw that allows for service exit in the top, and it needs to be set back so many feet off the street. And I'm not suggesting that I'm right, and I'm suggesting that perhaps you know something that I don't know. But I only learned of your situation right here by hearing it on the TV over there, that it was something that you believe didn't conform. So
If I could recommend to you,
Yeah.
based on if you proceed with this application and it's denied, I'm just gonna let you know it's a year before we'll relook at the
I
application.
understand that, yeah.
So if I, just based on the conversation I'm hearing, could recommend to you
Right.
to maybe withdraw it for right now and have the opportunity to come back with some more clarity, it might
Well, there's
service
only
you better.
only one unclear matter to me right now, and it's that rooftop service.
But we're not gonna spend time
Yeah.
at this meeting discussing that
That
issue.
one particular part of the
Absolutely.
application. Yeah.
So that's just I mean, if there's any other specific questions, it just sounds like it's not complete in your mind either, and I think it would better
The only thing that's
clarification.
not incomplete is the 5-minute conversation. I didn't have a plan about their interpretation of that rooftop. So
It's your call. I mean, you
so
can
my-
present
my-
and proceed,
My
but
interpretation is that it's not, there needs to be a setback off the front of the street by so many feet, and then that structure doesn't count as a floor. It's a three-story structure with a service entrance to the top. I guess there's some difference between residential and commercial, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of description of that I can see in the bylaw. I don't want to waste any of the planning board's more time, but I guess I'll suggest this one thing, is that I made it quite clear to the planning board that I was willing to sit down and find some way to develop this lot in sort of a manageable way, kind of to, if some counselors say, well, what is sort of as a matter of right do you have to develop this lot? And I was told that there's kind of no sort of situation that the planning board can work with me to find a way to plan this. And so I'm of obviously a difference opinion, but if there's some sort of technical thing that we can go through here that might, I don't want it to be a height restriction. I don't believe I have a height restriction issue. I don't, so if there's some way that we can clarify that right here, then that's great. If there's not, then I might suggest that we do, I can answer any other questions and then delay this till.
just defer it maybe for a month. That's what-
meeting.
Yeah, unless, Alex, do you have something you could
I can-
contribute?
I can read you the definition of height, so I think the plan is correct. It says, height means the vertical distance measured from the average finished grade to the highest point of the roof surface in the case of a flat roof, which this is, or a ridge or a gable, hip, or gambrel roof, excluding such structures as an antenna, that's not an antenna, municipal water storage tank, and it's not that, it's not a skylight, it's not a cupola, it's not an elevator penthouse, it's not a mechanical penthouse, it's not a solar panel, it's not a chimney, it's not a silo, it's not a smokestack, steeple or spire. So, that is additional height, on the roof.
Because it's a structure. It's a structure.
Right, because it's not exempted through those other provisions to deal with height. So the height is correct. It's not based upon what Ken said.
So, Madam Chair, so could I ask, that's what I wanted to ask, so when a building, like for example, 80 Grafton, when we did their height, they have an elevator shaft, and so the shaft goes to the top. So you're saying the height is from the ground up to the top of that shaft?
Well, it's one of
Well,
the
that's
exempted.
The elevator
It's a straw.
penthouse is exempted. This is an elevator penthouse.
What?
An elevator penthouse is exempted.
But it's similar to what you'd see right there. It's a structure, it's a
But
building.
that's not an elevator. It's
No,
a-
I know, it's,
But that's all we have, is just, that's the definition. An elevator is designed, an elevator needs to have that capacity. There's reasons for elevators to be the way they are.
I
And
would
I'm
like to
hearing
move
Mr.
that.
Petrie that we might need to look at our bylaw again in planning.
I'd like to move to defer it.
But again, from our point of view, I mean, the issue here is, this is we've been through, there's a lot of different nuances in this, including the outstanding parking, so I think staff are ready to go ahead unless there's some clarity. I don't know what additional clarity you're going to get, and I think the applicant is of the same mind, so it's up to you folks. If you want to proceed, you can withdraw, or not withdraw, but to defer is definitely an option.
Yeah.
I might suggest one thing, and I've never met you before, but I think you're Alex.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so based on what you just told me right now, which is not something I've never had a conversation, regarding that. I don't believe the bylaw to be anything but truthful. I can tell you right now that the only modification that would end up happening as a result of deferring is I would look at this and I would say I'm going to remove the rooftop access. And the roof would end the way it is. There'd still be solar panels and we would not have a height restriction requirement. So I can speed this up by a month if there's a way right now. We could say that what the one change I would make to the plan is I would remove the rooftop structure access.
Just a point of order, Madam Chair. I think we're getting into something beyond the recommendation. I would prefer, and I think the developer's asking for a deferral to try to work out something or to come back with something that we can look at, take a second sober look at. So I'm asking for a deferral.
We need a seconder.
Well,
for-
I think that after Mr. Petrie's done, we may have a few questions for Alex, so I think we may be a bit premature on the deferral. I suppose we can put the deferral on the floor, but that limits us then to only 2 questions each, once the deferral's on the floor.
Well, you can ask multiple questions in one question and second question. So the system works. But it just puts it on the floor.
Well, we're not going to discuss this anyway. This is just an opportunity with the applicant here to ask any more questions, and then we can deal with the deferral and stuff after the applicant's not and Jennifer gets to go. So, is there any more questions specifically for our applicant? Yes, Rosemary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You spoke about the parking, but could you just clarify again about how you're going to deal with the parking if you do build on the second lot?
Yeah. Do you mind putting the site plan? Yeah. So this is Bishop Street. So the garage, single car garage would meet the sort of the same setbacks as all the other houses on the street. In fact, it's set back by 2 feet, actually further back than the other house on the street. The street is very narrow, so 2 feet is just a little bit more throat to turn in and out of the garage. So this will provide parking for 18 Bishop, and then we will provide a right-of-way over the remaining frontage of 18 Bishop in favor of 20 Bishop. We've moved a utility pole that used to be here over in front of 20 Bishop to allow 20 Bishop to park out and to have a dedicated right-of-way parking space here. So by technical terms, that doesn't, I think a parking space technically needs to be on your own property. It can't be like a right-of-way over someone else's property. So my only point is that 20 Bishop currently doesn't have any legal parking. I'm simply doing something practical, providing, as it makes sense to me. I own both properties. I want to see off-street parking for them. That's how we would remedy this answer. So I'm not unopposed to deferring it, but to speed up the whole process, the one change that I would make, and I don't think Alex said it right on, we've already had lots of discussions, and I'm not...
The system has detected that a few lines are still connected to the conference and will attempt to disconnect them. If you wish to remain in the conference, please press star 1. 15...
So all I'm saying is that I'm happy to defer it, but I think Alex, he said it clearly, and I don't know what another meeting is going to achieve. The one change I would make right off the bat is I would remove the height variance issue by removing that tower, the access to the roof. There's no remedy for side yards or rear yard setback, and the bylaw already makes provision that the lot is undersized and the street frontage does not provide enough street frontage to not be considered in the situation if the lot pre-existed 2018 to not be considered a variance. I count 3 variances once I remove the height variance, the 2 side yards. And it's because the bylaw requires that houses can't be built at less than an 18-foot minimum width. And then, of course, the depth of the lot, we're building a house that's of similar depth to the other houses that are on the street. But anyway, having said that, if the planning board wishes to have another month to consider the situation, I'm in no panic. I'm happy to wait another month, give the planning board more time to consider it before deciding to go to public or not. I'm really leaving it to you.
Well, and I think there's 5 other ones. There's 6 variances that were presented. And I think it just seems like there's some confusion around how you're interpreting things and how our planning staff's interpreting the bylaw. I only recommended the deferral, so if we proceed and it doesn't go, then you're out for a year.
Yeah.
That was my thought.
And I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not specifically asking for it either, because I'm not quite sure what another month is going to provide us.
Yeah, Councillor Yankoff?
I have 2 things. One, just a quick observation. I don't see the pros and cons in the report. We normally have a little.
She had it up on the screen.
It was on the screen, but it's not in the report. Because I can't see it anymore. Unless I'm just turning the pages 100 times over and I'm not seeing it.
No, I didn't see it
So,
either.
I'm just wondering, when you did the other work last year on 20 Bishop, at that time, I know there was some talk just as the meeting began, that it was later discovered that it's actually 2 lots? Or have we always known it was 2 lots?
So at the meeting that we had here, you were I was trying to point you out there a little earlier. I think you were the person chairing the meeting, actually, that meeting. They said,
I doubt I'd be chair. I've never chaired a planning meeting, but I've been on the committee though forever. So.
I just remember you being here is all.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I said that it was evident that the survey, what do you call that process when you apply for to the city, to zoning inquiry, had been inconclusive. That I had mentioned that it was of my opinion that both lots were independent, and that it was still outstanding the results of the survey, and it would be forthcoming before the building permit was issued. And it was forthcoming before the building permit was issued, months before the building permit was issued. Yeah.
Which indicated that it was 2 lots.
It was 2 separate lots.
Right.
Yeah.
And even though that was brought up in that previous meeting, that certainly still does not then indicate and mean then what, if you bring a proposal for it, that it's an automatic, that you can develop what you want when there's 6 things that you haven't adhered to yet. So although you might have realized that's great, but I think back to what Councillor McCabe said, there's so many things that we'd hate to see you have to go a year when clearly maybe this needs to go back. When you had indicated you'd wanted to work with the planning department to come up with a way to develop this undersized lot. But I think what you're presenting here it's just too much. And I'd hate for you to have to wait a year when you could take the month and work with Jen and Mr.
But
Forrest.
we're sort of in the same mind. I mean, it's, again, it's just one of these things, the lot is too small for the development on it. I mean, he is correct. I mean, there's some really technical aspects of the bylaw in here. When you go into site-specific amendments, we reference variance. It's different than when if you sent notices to the public for variances. Now, the site-specific amendment, you're only referencing variance because it's not dealt with like a variance, it's dealt with as a rezoning, but it's trying to highlight deficiencies in the application. Because if you try to explain these things and not allude to frontage variance or whatever, he is correct. The fact is you're allowed to develop on a property that is less than the frontage and less than the lot area. It's referenced in there just to telegraph to you folks, this is a substandard lot. You're not granting variances on this, you'll deal with it as a rezoning, but it's trying to highlight those issues. But it's still, that there's a significant amount of other variances involved, as well as the fact that you've got this previous a variance that was tied to providing the parking on this lot. And that if you approve this, then you're gonna you have to get the other one in play, because it's now gonna be deficient. He's asking that you consider off-site parking, but if you open up that door, everybody wants off-site parking. We had a major issue with that in the past, and we don't allow off-site parking, so I think we're, no, we don't allow.
It's in the bylaw?
Exactly, that's been changed for years, because the fact of it is that's out of the sidebar. So I think the gentleman's correct. I mean, we can proceed and drop the issue of height. He doesn't have to do the top. We can make those clarifications if it goes to council, but I just think it's ready for a decision. I mean, I think this lot, staff are not going to change their opinion on this application. No disrespect to the applicant, it's just that the proposal is too big for this lot, and it's making the previous lot deficient, which you folks gave an approval on, with the parking on the one that's in play today.
So it's a major variance that we gave on that.
Right. So that is the issue for staff, that there's just very little for us to work with here. If it was a bigger lot, if he had some more wiggle room, but it's just a very narrow lot is the issue. He's trying to do his best to develop it, but we're just indicating that we can't support it. If you folks want to send it to a public meeting, if you want to deal with it, that's entirely up to you folks.
And just to be clear, I think, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so you can clarify, the impression I got, not the impression, but the direct correspondence I got is that there's sort of no provision that your staff could imagine where we would propose a single-family home that the plan department could approve or could recommend.
The intent is for that under lot provisions, that does give you a little bit of wiggle room, but it's that you get a building on the lot and don't need a whole lot more variances. And that's exactly what you're into. You're into these additional variances. But the key thing is that it's the parking issue that you're now trying to disconnect an approval from the previous lot, which required the parking for the previous lot, the major variance, and that ended up on this lot. So that's still, even if this got approved, then you have to go back and figure that out on the other lot and get sort of a dispensation or some kind of an approval that doesn't either have the required parking as required in the bylaw, or the city waived the parking, and you can't waive parking. Well, parking is a requirement that is not variable in the bylaw. So it's kind of you're kind of up against a lot of different rules and regulations that are kind of compounding to the decision that we're providing.
And I do agree that off-street parking or making some provisions for parking is important, which is why we've designed the site plan as it is. But I guess there's no provision when we went through the major variance process last time, that if in fact the findings of that the two lots were separate, that they must be amalgamated. And there was also no provision made in the building permit that was issued
the building permit would have been, I mean, there's some sequencing here. I wasn't involved.
There is notes here. I can share minutes of our meeting on July 12th, 2021. It was noted at the time of City Council's consideration of the major variance request, a boundary plan of survey had yet to be provided by the property owner. Accordingly, staff assumed at the time that 20 Bishop Street was one parcel rather than two parcels that was revealed following the major variance approval. As such, the Planning and Heritage Department's recommendation report dated on July 5th, 2021 regarding the variance request indicates any future development of the east parcel, proposed 18 Bishop Street, would not be supported from a planning perspective, as it would result in the removal of required on-site parking serving 20 Biship Street.
So could I ask, Madam Chair? So it's pretty clear. So was that conveyed to the developer?
I'm not sure.
Well,
It's in the report. It's there, and we've been having these discussions. So again, it's up to the board, but I think the applicant is correct. I think he's put a lot of time in this. We can drop the height up. We will clarify that if it goes out to a public hearing, that if he can amend his diagrams. But I don't think it's going to change the staff. The staff has got very little wiggle. There's nothing left to kind of indicate that this can be either narrowed up or to reduce the amount of variances. He's just limited in regard to the lot that he has.
Okay, well, we'll proceed with what the application is at hand. And any other questions for the developer at this time?
I guess I might suggest that there was some mention about deferring things, but other than like right off the bat, I can say that we can amend the proposed plan to have no access to the rooftop. That structure that makes it a fourth floor can be removed. But I guess I would say, should the neighbors have their opportunity? What harm is there in asking the neighbors to come to a public meeting to get their input, to allow the council to decide whether it makes sense for an owner to have the right to build on their vacant lot or not?
Yep, and thank you, we'll
I
take
guess
this.
you can do that, but then staff would likely, if you're gonna go to a public meeting, we would likely then request that he fix the other property, that the major variance, he's got a condition on the other property that is tied to this property. So therefore, we don't think it should proceed, because he's already committed on the previous major variance application for the parking on this lot.
And that can be explained in a few minutes. I mean, we'll have that discussion in here. This is a recommendation. This is a recommending body, so what we recommend will still go on to council for the final decision, whether or not this will proceed to public consultation. Any other questions?
I guess I might only say the last thing to that point. What if, I mean, the lot is owned, both lots are owned by me. There is no current restriction. I'm proposing a solution that involves off-street parking for both properties, but there's nothing limiting currently the ability for another owner for 18 Bishop at some juncture in the future to own that property.
We would contest that your variance approval that you got on the other property is binding you to keep that lot for that parking.
And
That's what we're contesting.
And that's what, that was in the background.
And it was,
And that was
we're gonna
conveyed
do
to you,
those,
Jason,
we're going to,
when we gave the major variance. Was it conveyed to him?
Well, I think at that time.
That was conveyed to him.
Well, the reality was that he was still waiting to get the survey done. That's where this all came from, so.
well, we're just gonna look at this particular application and we're gonna move on from there.
Right.
And we will have discussion to decide whether or not this board decides to recommend whether to proceed with it or not. And council on Monday, a week from tonight, will have the final say.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Yes, Councillor Yankoff.
I just ask that before, no matter what we decide here, before it moves on to council, we need the pros and cons included in this like we always have.
Yeah.
Because they're up there, but they're not in here.
Yeah.
And Alex, I know that Jen's not here, so. you
Yeah,
need
I
to
can,
include it.
yeah, she.
And the other thing is, I think it's really important in the background.
That the minutes from July the 12th are
The
included.
minutes from July the 12th should be included
Yeah.
in that.
I agree.
So that
Thank you for
when Councilor McLeod speaks to this, or probably you because you're more familiar with it, that it's clear to council why the history is there.
Mhm.
And so that's just, just to make sure that it's clear.
Yep, we'll make a note that that'll happen, okay? That's perfect. So I guess we have to decide now as a board whether or not we want to support staff recommendation
Or
to
defer.
shut it down.
Or deferred?
He never asked for it.
No, he didn't.
Okay, so
It's not
again,
his decision, it's still our
yeah,
decision.
we can defer it. That's not up to him. He
But to
can-
defer it, we heard
Okay.
very clearly, I
So
don't think there's
the
much. to
background you
defer.
referred to was from last July 12th, right? Yeah. He didn't have that information. Is that in our report?
It's in the public
It's in the
document.
minutes. It's in the public document.
Yeah.
Okay, so the public document is what I have here,
On page 3 of 6.
3 of 6.
Yeah, on the proposed 18 Bishop Street.
Well, no, the document I have right here. Look at the 3 of 6.
Page 12.
Page 12.
Oh, page 12 on the,
And again, Alex, he was briefed that this information was conveyed to him.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the fact is, this has been ongoing, and it's just one of those things where, this is a complicated property, and it's involving two properties, and procedurally, you can't really deal with one without dealing with the other, and how do you do that at this stage? He wanted to come forward with this, that's his right. It's up to you folks whether you want to go to a public meeting, but I guess what we're indicating, how does this board want to respond to that parking? You cannot, he's not allowed to have off-site parking. He got an approval for a major variance to provide the parking on the lot that's in question, which will be lost as a result of if this gets approved. So he's not only dealing with one property, he's dealing with problems now with two properties. Because the previous one got approved on the basis that he had parking for the major variance on this lot. So we just look at this, it's too big, he's losing parking from the previous project, and we just don't see any merit in seeing it proceed, but again, that's entirely up to the council and up to the board to decide.
Can I just ask another question, Chair?
Yes, you sure can.
Alex, can I defer to the?
Yes, you sure can.
Alex, could you answer this for me in real
Simple language.
simple language?
Oh, I don't know. I'm a simple person.
With all things presented, what if anything, could a little miniature house be built that has room for a car? Like, is there absolutely anything
That planning would
that
consider.
planning could look at that could be put, whether it be a little teeny tiny home or, I don't even, yeah.
It's going to be a very difficult lot to develop, and the reality is that, the implication is it was likely purchased as one property. It became aware that it was two later, and, if somebody wants to take advantage of it, that's fine, but the reality is it's tiny when it's included in the other property that's in play.
Because he already expanded his original property
Right.
into this property.
So if he reversed the first thing from last summer and somehow came up with a solution for parking for the other, which he can't.
He can't. That's
He
and
can't.
that's a big kind of a tricky one on this application.
So, Madam Chair, again, we gave the major variance, and then we found out after we gave the major variance that it was two lots.
Well, there was a lot of things going on.
No, just yes or no.
Yeah, the reality is he
Yes or no?
The implication for the staff people was they thought it was one lot at that time.
Okay, but after we gave the major variance.
Right.
Our department found out it was two lots.
And I
from
think,
the information.
and
Yeah.
again, Emily, who was dealing with the other property, it was indicated in this request that came in for the legal, what can occur on the property, it was indicating that the property next door, the one in play tonight, had to be there to provide the parking for the major variance that was granted.
Because we thought it was two lots.
Right, we thought it was
One.
we thought it was
One lot, we thought it was
Right,
one lot.
right.
Then we found out it was two lots.
Right.
So what we're telling this owner,
Right.
this developer,
Right.
that you can't do anything because you have two lots instead of
Right.
one lot.
Right, he can't solve the problem on his previous approval.
So could he ask to consolidate the lot,
He can get this,
right? And
no
then
problem.
can he do anything with the lot with a consolidated lot?
He may be able to add a little bit more, he may be able to do a garage, an accessory
Yeah.
building, a driveway, he could do a number of things.
And Madam Chair, the reason I bring this up, because in other jurisdictions, this was something that was discussed under the National Housing Supply Summit just about a month ago. Other municipalities are looking at lots and how to intensify the use. Like, we have a lot here that basically he can't do anything if we don't find something for him to use, or we change our bylaws, maybe through this comprehensive review. I just find that we did something and found out afterwards. All that information should have been to us before we voted on the major variance.
Well, it's again, I mean, there's a lot of, there's multiple people involved in this, but it's not as complicated as you would think. The bottom line is, even if you take the parking out, it's still too small of a lot. There's all kinds of lots in the downtown that are even tinier than this. There's just you just hit a point where the lot is too small. You just consolidate it back with the main dwelling, and you go from there. We don't have to work to find somebody what they can do on a lot. I mean, it's his property, he should likely consolidate it back. That's my personal opinion, but
We can
he's
look at
asking
Aaron
to develop
Staver's
it.
recommendations and maybe have garden suites and something attached that we can look at.
Right, I mean, he may be able to expand the existing building, he got the major variance on already, but the reality is he's maxed out the potential on both these lots, is the staff position, but we defer to you folks.
Yes.
Just one final question. Last July, when he came to us, he had indicated, and it must be in the minutes somewhere, that he was quite confident that it was 2 lots and that he had fully intended to develop the second lot. So that's what I was trying to say, just because you say that that's what you plan to do, it hasn't given him carte blanche to say, okay, well then, we told you you could do that, because at the time, we still didn't know. But are you saying that regardless, it's still tied back to number 20?
It is, that's one issue, but let's say that wasn't even an issue. The staff position isn't changing. Parking is a problem on the place next door, and the amount of intensity of the use of this lot is way too much for that tiny lot, and goes beyond the provision in the zoning bylaw that says if you have a smaller lot, you should have the right to develop it, but it's for the most minimal thing you can get on it that doesn't require typically any additional variances. And this one is requesting a lot of variances on that lot, and there's also triggering problems on the lot next door.
So would it be, just follow up, would it be important then to add on to staff's recommendation, as well as to not go to public consultation and not develop, that staff's recommendation would be to consolidate this lot and then look at options?
They will get into that.
What's happening here tonight, we're getting into, that's not our job,
Correct.
to fix his problem.
Yeah.
He's asking for something specific. We have to stay within the lines of what he's asked for. He's asked to drop the height. We can clarify that if it goes to public meeting. But that's, we can't speculate or try to figure out what we can do in the future.
And it's, I know, and
Yeah.
that's why I recommended the deferral, so he would have opportunity if he wanted to pull back and come back and look at different options. He hasn't chosen the deferral option, so we have to decide, are we wanting to either support staff's recommendation to not move this to public, or I need a motion to go against staff's recommendation?
Can I have one just quick question, just so I understand this? So that's the lot. We've already tied up one parking spot from number 20.
Right, yeah.
So to me, a third of the lot is gone for street frontage. So do you still consider that the frontage, or is it now just the frontage from where that variance is in?
Well, it's the frontage is the legal. It's the legal
Description.
Right, legal. So it's 22 feet.
Even though part of it's
right. But he got his approval on the basis that he was going to use that lot for parking.
Yeah.
And so that's his problem. But even beyond that, that's one issue, major issue. But this is a very intensive use of that property. We've got a lot of these, small lots in the downtown. And to the mayor's point, there are all kinds of ways you can intensify the use of a standard lot. There's on a 60 by 100 foot lot, but this isn't a 60 by 100 foot lot. There's a third of a standard lot, and with a third of the lot area, and with a fairly
That's
tall
where we go
building.
back to that presentation that we had, looking at moving maybe what we can start to allow. That's going to be.
With Aaron
with-
Sapp.
Absolutely, he had a great presentation on different land uses.
But Aaron was not contemplating a lot this time.
No.
No, but I'm saying-
The size of the lot reduced it, so
Right,
it can now allow for more secondary or garden suite development.
Yeah.
Which if he consolidated and did something like that, that could be.
So Madam Chair, just again, this major variance from last year has really confused what we're trying to do here. So really what we have now, 20 Bishop has off-site parking.
On 18 Bishop.
Yeah, so it has off-site parking. That happened because we did not have the information before we voted on the major variance.
Correct.
So, I'm for public consultation. I'm not supporting not to go to a public consultation if that's where we're at.
So are you putting a motion to not go with staff's recommendation and?
No, I'll vote when we vote on the resolution.
So you're not putting a motion for it, okay,
No,
so
no,
we
you
need a
don't want
motion.
deferral.
What?
I put a motion to defer it and that has been turned down.
Well, I don't, we can't defer it, the applicant has to defer it.
No, we can defer it for more information.
Okay, anyway, does anyone want to put a motion on the
I'll
floor?
make a motion that we support staff's decision not to send it to public
Okay,
consultation.
is there a seconder for
What is
that?
it again, Bob?
That we support staff's recommendation not to send it to public consultation.
Yeah, I would second that.
Okay, so we have a mover and we have a seconder. All those in favor of,
Question?
oh, sorry, question.
Yeah. Although I look at this this report, and I see all the cons for it. I have a hard time not supporting at least public consultation, because I go back to that. I cannot remember in my 3.5 years on council that we've never at least gone to public consultation, so I will not be supporting this resolution.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, if I could just reiterate, other municipalities are looking at many different options in intensifying use. And again, this is what we have to start looking at as a city. I know, as Chris knows, there's lots of land to the north, but if we're trying to redevelop, reinvigorate our downtown, we have to look at uses beyond what we're zoned at this point in time. I look at the development on Richmond Street that's next to the Rochford Square condo. Now, that's off street parking because there was no parking, so they're all parking up at the Pownell Parkade. So when I hear we banned it, but there's still some exceptions going on, like we have to, I'm talking about trying to work with developers, and you know what, we may get some different views at the public meeting, and that's why I'm not supporting.
So we have a motion on the floor. Any other questions or comments? We're ready to take a vote. The motion is to work with staff, to support staff, not move this on for recommendation to council. All those in favor?
Sorry, just to clarify that motion, it's a recommendation to council to not proceed to public
correct.
consultation.
Yeah, thank you. I know my words get all twisted, so is my head half the time. All those in favor of that motion? All those not in favor? Oh, Basil? Sorry, I forgot about you. Basil?
Oh, yes, I'll vote yay.
You're going to support not to? Okay, so that's 4, Ellen. And all those against the motion? 3, 4 to 3.
What did Basil vote for?
You voted with recommending not to take this to public consultation, Basil?
Yes.
Thank you. Council will still have the final say on Monday. Oof, that was supposed to be an easy one. That was a lot of information. I'm glad I didn't miss it.
Just make a comment. I think I've commented on this before, but it seems to me like we have an issue around going to public consultation or not. And in this situation, when we are voting in favor of not going to public consultation, it sounds like we're not supporting the application. However, it seems to me like it's a two-step process. Like, what does this committee think around? Do we support or not support recommending, an application? And then secondly, there's public consultation. So I'm just speaking generally around the workings of the committee. If we believe in public consultation, then we should be doing it all the time, and it shouldn't necessarily be linked in with, do we support or not support an application?
Right.
I've noticed that before, and generally we do go to public consultation.
Yeah.
And in this case, because there were so many variances required, if we have these bylaws, then obviously they're there for a reason. If they're not important, then we should get rid of them or change them. When you've got 6 bylaws that
Good
are
argument,
changed,
Rosemary.
there's a problem, right? So that's why I voted that we not go to public consultation. But now I'm speaking just around process, and I think we need to kind of think about somehow or other separating, public consultation from the decision about whether we are going to.
So just, if I'm hearing you correctly, Rosemary, you're saying that you didn't vote to go to public consultation because it was tied actually with the application, not that it was just tied with going to public consultation.
Well, I think in this case, there were so many problems with this application, right? But we're using moving to public consultation as kind of an approval process. Is how I have viewed it in the past several years. It's like if an application kind of gets approval or recommendation from this committee, and we say let's send it to public consultation.
See, I voted not to go to public consultation, because when I look at the limitations of this, I'll not be supporting it when it comes back, regardless of what happens at public. consultations. Therefore, I don't recommend going there.
So if I'm hearing everyone correctly, maybe the next time a planning committee meets and we're opening up this official plan and looking at things, that maybe going to public consultation should happen before, is part of the process before it even comes back to planning board for discussion. That it's just an automatic thing. If there's certain things that somebody is applying for that don't fit within the official plan, it's an automatic thing. It just goes to public consultation, then it comes back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, the recommendation on page 10, I'm seeing the pages here now. The Planning and Heritage Department recommends the Planning Board recommended to Council to deny the request to site-specific exemption application involving the following variants. That's what you're saying you should have voted on, right? Instead of proceed to public consultation. That's, instead of that public consultation there, we should have voted to request, to deny the request regarding site-specific exemption application. And if it did pass it, then we'd have another vote to send it. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, it's
Rosemary?
worded twice in the thing. On
Yeah.
page 15, it says in consideration, Planning Heritage recommends the Planning Board recommend to Council to deny the request to proceed to public consultation regarding the site-specific
Yeah.
exemption, whereas over here,
It names them.
It names them. Mhm.
Madam Chair, the reason for this is most of them do go to public consultation.
Yeah, this.
But this one, the point is that, and again, I think it's around the table, you should not go to, in my humble opinion, you shouldn't go to public consultation if you know the answer before you go to public consultation. And the fact is, if you know the public are going to be, possibly, I have no idea, I don't know what the public are going to think, but the reality is public consultation going to change any of the limitations on this property? Or is it just going to delay the inevitable? But that's a decision for this board. He has the right to ask for it, he's asked for it, and you folks have to advise accordingly.
There's always ways to improve
Yeah.
our processes, so that's
So
good.
Maybe another way of looking at it would be like, does an application meet a certain threshold that would say, yes, okay, let's take it to public consultation?
No, you
And if
can't, unfortunately, again, we're kind of straying from, these processes are, I know that there's always a way to improve them, but these things have been going on for a long time. The next step in the process for council is to whether they want, their next decision as council, do we want to go to public consultation? When you say we don't want to go to public consultation, the planning board is saying we don't agree with this, we would deny this, but because we don't think you should go to public consultation. But that's the next part of the process for council. Council's got to decide on Monday night, do we want to go to public consultation or do we not? This board is saying, we're recommending that you not go to public consultation, which is in fact a denial of the application.
Well, I guess it's how you look at it, Alex, but.
What's that?
I think we could argue this all night, but it's not the place to do it.
Yeah, no, and you know, like, it's likely timely for a lot of other reasons to have this group meet just to go over procedural things, where we're going with the new official plan, trends that are happening, affordable housing, but again, you're right that unfortunately tonight is, we're just dealing with this one application.
But if I could just make one more comment, I think that's an excellent idea. If we could have a meeting to discuss some of our processes and maybe, for clarification, for improvement, because we never get an opportunity to talk about our processes. We're always deep into applications, so.
Yep,
And it is timely when it's coming into the new plan. And
Now the plan, just to be clear, the plan is going to be one thing, but the plan is not going to get down into the weeds on this. This is zoning.
no, but we did look at looking at our bylaws and everything.
Right.
That was part of the last plan, was that we were going to look at our bylaws and our policies from each department. And I think what you're saying is it's a good time, and it's always good to revisit.
What will happen with the new official plan? The new official plan will have 5 to 10 years of a to-do list for council. And then the thing that's going to happen the minute the official plan's done, it's by law, then the zoning bylaw has to be redone to reflect what's in.
But we still have to work within our policies and bylaws we have right now. And I think what Rosemary's saying is it's probably good to relook at those to see if there's any that we could change a little bit to make it a little bit
Your next
more.
item on your list is exactly that.
Well, that's good. Okay, make a note of that too, please, Ellen, just so we can remember to
Write
talk
that
about it.
And
Write that
Madam
down.
Chair,
Yes,
does this-
sir.
Does this go to a public consultation, the zoning development bylaw,
Well, he's gonna present that right now.
That's up to you folks.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have that presentation right now.
And just
I know.
don't forget the pros and cons, because we said how important it is for it to be in our.
Yeah. Jennifer, I don't know whether Jennifer knew it, I don't know whether she didn't quite catch that, but we can get her to tidy that up.
All right, we're gonna talk now about the zoning and development bylaw, PH-ZD.2, housekeeping amendments. Alex.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is just a number of things. We've discussed some of these at the planning committee. The things that I'm going to speak to you tonight in regard to these housekeeping items are water lot amendments, development and building permits, reconsideration process, home occupations, just the zone table, election signs, subdivision requirements, definition of terms, and the fee schedule. So on the issue of the water lots, you'll recollect that we had an application last month by the water lot operators. Because the province hadn't signed off on these permanent amendments, they had to come in to get their operation going for the season. They got a temporary use. We worked with them at that time. We gave them terms and conditions on their temporary use. The applicant is working very closely. They're very close to meeting all those conditions. And we made a few changes to the terms and conditions in their temporary use. And we're going to change these permanent, or we're proposing to change these permanent amendments that just got approved in the last month by the province. And it has to do with the issue under the terminology of buildings on these floating structures. We've struggled with that from day one, the building code does not apply to those floating structures. So we had some terminology that when we made those permanent amendments, dealing with things like occupancy permit, which is the standard for building permits. Primarily what this is doing is just dealing with, instead of a building permit, we're referring to a development permit. Development permits are things that planners deal with, fire department deals with, but the building department doesn't deal with. So we're just changing some terminology in here, getting rid of the reference to occupancy permit, getting rid of any references to the National Building Code, and then we're specifying how the applicant will get a private person, an engineer, to review the floating dock and then convey to us that it meets these certain provisions that we feel will certainly protect the public. So if you just go into those sections, you'll see just a few changes in there. You'll see a lot about get rid of occupancy permit, put in development permit. And again, there's only really one provider that's going to come forward, to my knowledge, on these commercial lots. We had before that there was a maximum of 3 liveaboard vessels float home shall be permitted on the zone. Well, at the time we wrote this, I thought there was only 3 down there when the previous operator was there. Came to our attention later that there's 4. Since this applies to every lot down there, we still think 3 are ideal on any lot down there, because there's 2 properties that are being operated by the group that are down there right now. But really, the only addition we put in there, 3 is the maximum on a lot unless you have historically have had more. So when the Valerie Doherty comes in and Peter Toombs, they've had 4 on their property. We didn't want to limit them before they even get to us, that they were constrained from something that they already had approval for. So that's a small little change there. And it tidied up some terminology, talked about what we're looking for from the qualified engineer. They have provided that information. They haven't struggled with it. In some regards, they may find this a little bit more flexible for them. So for the most part, it's just, this is the last kick at the can. We worked hard on those amendments for water lots, but this will set that application up when they come in for their permanent approval, and that may be in the next month or so. And they're already pretty close to getting their development permit approval that they were required to get as a part of their temporary use that they just got last month. And the terms and conditions on the temporary use development approval is the same that will be in here. It's just clarifying a few details. So if you want, you can ask me any questions on water lots, and then I'll move to the next one if you have any questions dealing with those water lots.
And this is to move it to public consultation anyway, right?
Yeah, all of them, at the end of it, if you don't want one to go to public consultation, you'll have to reference it. So that's water lots. So the next one is, there's just, every once in a while in these, so under section 3.3.1, there was a word missing. It says no person shall, and it didn't have undertake in there, so we just are gonna put undertake in there to clarify that. The next big item, we've discussed this numerous times at the planning committee meeting, it's reconsideration. Reconsideration, we've had, I don't know how many reconsiderations we have. Every time we've looked at them from a staff point of view, we didn't see any utility in going further to a public meeting or public consultation on it. In a lot of cases, people pursued their opportunity to go to IRAC. Every time we've dealt with one of these in the past, we've always indicated we felt IRAC was a much better body to deliberate on these anyways. The reason why the reconsideration process was put in the bylaw, it's not a requirement under the MGA, it's not a requirement under the Planning Act. The reason it was put in there was that, let's say that we did something, it was somebody took us to IRAC and it was very evident we had made a procedural flaw in it. It was to allow us to go back and fix it and not have a big hearing at IRAC. Certainly staff aren't perfect, but all of the issues that have come up in the past were never, they were never the issues which we intended that the reconsideration process could help fix. The other thing that I will note that is possibly new to you folks is the IRAC has changed their process to move to mediation. So there's another situation I'm involved in on an application that you folks have dealt with. You turned it down. I'm involved in mediation on that one. So whatever happens there, it'll come back to you. So the reality is reconsideration is a duplication of the IRAC process. It's very time consuming, can be confusing to the public. There's a fairly significant onus on the public to even make, they have to follow the procedure. It's very legalistic. So the bottom line is we're just asking that it be removed, and we feel that the mediation process, which is relatively new at IRAC, can fill that void. The thing is with mediation, if we went to mediation, what happens at mediation is IRAC doesn't come right out and say it, but if they see a problem, they're going to let you know early that they see, well, why did you do it that way? And then our lawyer would go, wow, they're kind of telegraphing, if we hear this thing, this is, it may not break in your favor. So we would do the same thing under reconsideration that it was originally intended to do. It was come back and fix that process.
Is IRAC moving a little faster?
I don't know that it's moving
So my
any
only
faster.
concern with this one is that you get an application in and blah, 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 and if there was something and then it takes...
This is only doubled the staff time and delayed things delays things. What happens is when somebody uses reconsideration, they file an IRAC
Yes, and
application
then
at the
they
same
put it on
time,
hold.
and then they just wait. So if you're the applicant, the real decision maker here always is IRAC.
Okay.
And
No, I just wanted to ask.
No, that's a very good point.
No, it can go to the Supreme Court of Prince Edward Island.
Yeah, sure.
That's the final decision maker, or if it goes to the Supreme Court of Canada.
Right.
Madam Chair, that's why I've asked, are these amendments, I thought in the past these amendments went to public consultation.
This is what this is for. This is to go to public
But there's no
consultation.
recommendation to go to a public consultation.
Yeah,
Yeah, there is.
Is it the last page?
It's the first
Be
one.
recommended to proceed to public consultation.
Yeah.
Alana, can you step in this chair for
It's
2
at the
seconds? Or
bottom.
just, Alana's going to chair for a moment. I just gotta use-
Okay, on the reconsideration.
Yes.
How many did we have in the last 3.5 years? One?
I think we've had at least 3, but I mean, it could be more than that. It's
No,
just,
it's not more than that.
yeah, so I'm just trying to,
And they weren't all on, I know on planning, they weren't all on planning. I know that, we had a reconsideration something else. So if you go to IRAC, it's now a very legal process. You cannot go in there and represent yourself. You need a
No,
lawyer.
you-
You can,
Yeah.
but if you try to make a case,
Yeah.
right, you need legal representation. Because before, and Paul remembers this, before IRAC, if you want to appeal something, you had to go to the provincial court. IRAC, under the Gaze government, gave a platform so people could go, the people of Prince Edward Island could appeal and try to present their case.
The system has detected that a few lines are still connected to the conference and will attempt to disconnect them. If you wish to remain in the conference, please press star 1. 15.
Yeah, there are still people there that do not have any legal
No,
counsel.
but I know that the board prefers that you have legal representation, which is a cost, and no different when it was pre-IRAC, and you had to go to the provincial court. The reconsideration process, as I said, I think is a very important piece of municipal democracy, and, you know, I know that we're going to go to a public consultation because the sentence is finished at the bottom of Appendix F, be recommended proceed to public consultation. And I hope that, you know, we make sure that we advertise that these are some of the elements that will be part of the public consultation.
That they win the ad. But the other side of reconsideration is, I think I gotta be careful here, but if reconsideration is opening up a whole legal process on our side, and if it goes badly, and if you've got an aggressive developer that doesn't like how we dealt with the reconsideration, there's litigation potentially coming our way, because there's no requirement for this. It's our own process. If we handle it inappropriately, because we're not lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, you folks aren't lawyers, the planning board's not lawyers, and when you somewhat say, well, look, we thought we could make these decisions, there can be ramifications on that. That's why IRAC is they know what the parameters are. You know, I don't always agree, but the fact is, I do know that all of those decisions over there are looked at very professionally and legally, and that's what it's about. It's a legal process, and I'm not a planners, not lawyers.
Yeah, we need some of that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just a question for Alex. How long has IRAC had this mediation process in place?
That's relatively new. I've only been involved in one of them thus far, but it's becoming more two or three. Sorry, now that it's coming up. It's coming up almost. You know, and that's Mr. Hooley handles that. We don't have to agree to mediation, but it's always felt that if you can resolve this before they rule on it, it may be good. But it's usually, these are decisions. What goes to IRAC are decisions of council. So we're just trying to make sure that those decisions of council are made appropriately and cannot be challenged. Is really do
you feel like it's working, or has it made
mediation is kind of new. I mean, and you'll see some of them that may come back to you and how they lay it out under mediation as to what they think, because what it's going to be doing is going to be looking at a council decision and saying through mediation we think something else should happen.
Yeah, it gives you the heads up before you go to that name. Councillor Yankoff.
What about, I know that the province last year, they appointed their first ever ombudsman. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Ombudsperson, yes.
So is that an option, instead of us just taking it right out of the mix to address the idea of, you know, legal counsel and things going to IRAC? Is there a way, because I believe that's kind of the role that's what they do for the province. It's a sober second thought, or it's a reevaluation before.
But I guess, folks, you know, not to interrupt, but the Planning Act is interwoven into the Appeals Act. So those two pieces of legislation flow together. There's no ability to open up things for somebody else to jump into it, because then that's a sort of a third type of appeal. I mean,
and it sounds like the mediation part is their sober second thought before it gets to the next level. So it just moves on from our decision and let someone come back and say you might want to relook.
Appeal is about legal review.
Correct.
And the fact is that this reconsideration process introduced a legal review at the municipal level that involves planners, it involves planning board, it involves council, but it's all legal. And if you make a misstep in that, you set yourself up, which is to a challenge from somebody that's got the resources that they either had an approval or they didn't have an approval. We introduced this other process, and somehow it did not flow well or wasn't handled well. That's what IRAC is there for, and they hear lots of applications.
So, Madam Chair, the business that we're into when it comes to zoning development, it's a litigation matter, whatever way you look at it. Doesn't matter if it's reconsideration, anything. It's always, it'll be litigated. or it could be litigated. I just find that this reconsideration is for someone that just doesn't have the financial means to go to that next step. And when we go to IRAC, the city, that's it. When we go on behalf of a developer that we gave major variances to, they don't pay, we pay the bill. It's our lawyer that has to defend the city council's decision. So again, reconsideration for me is something I want to keep in there, but again, it will be going to a public consultation process and hopefully we'll hear.
I think there'll be lots of discussion still whenever we
Thank
get to
you.
that part. Did you have another question? Are you good?
Not on that one.
Okay, next.
Okay, so the next one is,
Home occupation.
okay, so just under home occupation, this is just tightening it up because of our STR regulations that just come in, and they're not going to come into full force and effect until March of 2023, but it's just adding the phrase, and it's kind of complicated how this is already written in the bylaw, but it's dealing with home occupation. It says that proprietors of a home occupation shall live in the dwelling which the home occupation is located. But we're indicating we need to add in there, it is the proprietor's principal residence. So, that's the whole idea between a home occupation. It is your home, and that reinforces the STR regulations, which when we discuss them coming through, your entitlements come from the fact that you can only rent out your principal residence. So it's just adding, the principal residence.
But it already means that.
It has to do with the way that there's a number of different sentences dealing with home occupations. It's not all in the same sentence. This makes it clear that it has to be it has to be your principal residence to have a home occupation.
Well, how can it, isn't it, I mean, that's what home occupation,
This is the problem with planning, and we just finished the previous thing. It's all about the law. It's all about terminology, and it's all about people that are going to challenge us. And if it's not 100% clear, then that's a bit. That's why we're trying to tighten up the bylaw.
it's dangerous for you.
That's great. We always work on getting clarity. The clearer we are, the better we are. Okay.
So the other one is just by repealing this table, and there's it's just we repeal this table and correct the land use numbering, because what happens is when we're changing these zones around, the numbering all changes. So it's nothing really changing with the zones, it's just the numbering. So that one's fairly straightforward.
What I miss, Alex, is that when we had baseline doing our zoning, where you could go into the zoning in different layers, you could look at the whole city and see R1, R2. What we have on our, when you go to our zoning and development bylaw and you open up the Acrobat or Adobe application, you can't really clearly see the zones, like.
That's all on the GIS. So
but not everybody has access to GIS.
Right. But we're hopefully improving our GIS capabilities in the organization.
For public use.
Right. And that would be on the list. There's no reason why people can't go in and look at zoning. But again, it's tricky to put these things on. When you put these things up and you put it out, and I'm looking at Chris there. Sometimes people look at these things and they're not used to reading these maps and these interpretations, and they jump to conclusions. But again, it doesn't hurt.
But then that's your job to clarify.
Right.
And then have a 70 candy.
Right. But the point is that depending on how you put it up, you have to put these caveats on that. Because of it's a smaller scale. They don't. To your point, they just don't have the tools we have. They don't have the documentation, and a lot of things. These things are getting down to feet, right? In regard to sometimes a property split zone. So anyway, I mean, it's the GIS tools that we have are very helpful in that regard. But so that's that one. This is the one that's near and dear to the politician's heart. Is the definition of us. Election signs that drove me crazy every election year.
Especially in 2018.
Well, it's just the fact is it said you could put the signs up 30 days prior to the election, but the election may only be called for 18 days. So if you got some inside knowledge, you put up yours 30 days, and then you're out in front of your colleagues that have got the signs up, And then they call elections PEI calls me and says, well, we didn't call the election yet. How come Mr. X has got his signs up? And then the Mr. X says, because I'm 30 days from the election. So it's just changing it to the day of the election. The day the election is called. We don't have a writ at the municipal level.
No.
But that's why the terminology is just on the day the election is called, your signs can go up. It's pretty straightforward.
But we have fixed dates, so what does that mean municipally?
So November 7th, when there's no really official announcement that a municipal election starts, or we know the date. It's the first Monday in November every 4 years.
So 30 days from that day is when people start putting their signs.
Is that what you're saying, Alex?
Well,
30
the
days
problem
from-
was in the past for either federal elections, again, I'm not a politician, but some
You
of them,
assume
if you
that
have a
the writ's
snap
gonna be
election.
dropped, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a snap election and it's a 20-day election, somebody that put up their signs prematurely are covered by the fact that the bylaw says they can put them up 30 days earlier. That's not the intent. The intent is that the signs go up the day the election is called, by the federal, provincial, or municipal level.
But I think what his worship is saying, that from a municipal, there is no.
But
There's
they
no
put
call.
their signs in the city. So basically, if you're a province, if you're with the Conservatives and the Liberals and it's in the city and you're running in this district, and they
No,
get,
talking about the municipal elections.
yeah, I know.
Municipal elections, we don't have a rate.
No.
We don't have a.
We know it's 30 days before November
Right.
6th.
Right.
That's when you can put your signs up.
Is that what you're
Is that what
saying?
you're saying?
That's what he
Alex?
said.
Yeah, it's the everybody knows the election date.
Right.
So as long as you do not put up your sign before the election date,
Right.
the date the election starts, then you're inside the parameters.
November 7th is not the start of the election, it is the election date.
And that's when you put 30 days before the
Well,
election.
no,
date.
but, Alex, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the day the election starts, it's the start
Starts.
day of the election.
Starts, not the day of the election.
Yeah, exactly.
Election starts like there's 60 days, for the federal election there are 6 weeks, has to be minimum 6 weeks for the election. Our date doesn't start, the date is the election, November 7th, it's the first Monday.
When I read this, it tells me if it's November 6th, then on October 6th, you can put your sign up.
That's not what that's not what Alec is saying.
This says, the proposed wording is very clear that election signs cannot go up until an election has been officially called.
That's
Has to be
right.
called.
Yeah, yeah.
But we don't call
We
it
don't-
election.
We don't call, provincial and federal governments do
Yeah.
call them.
But aren't you on a fixed date election?
Yeah, we're on a fixed date, we're on a date, not only a fixed year, we're on
Yeah.
a fixed date.
Yeah.
It's the first Monday of, first Monday of November every 4 years.
Yeah, so your date is fixed.
But,
whereas the
so
provincial
there's no
federal
call. So what
Calls it the-
Councillor McCabe is saying, then it's just 30 days before that date. And that's what I'm trying to clarify with Mr.
Well, I called elections PEI and they helped me with the terminology, so, okay, and they said there is no
We need to
writ.
clarify.
Right, but I will ask them that question. So there's got to be, everybody knows the election day, but there's got to be the day the election starts.
For the municipal election.
Right, and if that's.
Wouldn't that be the day when they stop taking in applications for who's gonna run?
Could be.
There's some time.
Yeah, because, okay, so they helped me on the wording on this one. The next one
Put your sign up,
is.
put your face up.
Before that.
Oh, subdivision, this is an old provision that was in there, and you know, like, again, it said, an application for final subdivision, this is just for consolidation of 2 existing lots into 1 large lot may be submitted to the planning board. Laurel informed me we haven't done this, and may is never a good word to have in a bylaw. Should either be shall or shouldn't say may, because may,
Least
should
sure.
that go or shouldn't it go?
Names not that great.
That's right, yeah. So we haven't used that provision, so we're gonna just, we're recommending strike that. There used to be 9 copies of the final set of plans. There's more people involved in the process, or 8 copies, and now we're asking for 9 copies.
Has the distance changed, Alex? It says 100 meters now.
It's always 100 meters.
Oh.
The distance hasn't changed. And this is just for consolidation. So that's, you know, again, it's a part of the bylaw we don't use. And then the other thing too is under consolidation, it just didn't make it clear when you send out the letter that somebody's going to consolidate their lot, when to respond by. So it's always 14 days. So we just want to make it clear in the letters that go out on a consolidation. We don't send out that many, but it would just say, please respond to our office within 14 days. So that's the clarification there. And then, we're repealing the other section. The council shall make the final decision because they don't, for a consolidation is refused. We're just, we don't use that section as well, or the writing of the decision. And then we're moving into, there's a couple of words. The building. We had changed the definition of building way back for the water lots, and I mentioned earlier, buildings and water lots ironically just don't mix well. So the old building, we're asking the old definition of building comes back because we think it will cover everything that we can, and we didn't need to make an accommodation for buildings on water lots because we're trying not to make reference to that. There are developments on water lot. And then the last one is our fee schedule. It used to be in the zoning bylaw, and we had reference to the last time it was updated was June of 2019. We've recently made changes, so that just falls into the new fee schedule. So we just delete those old references to dates. So those, no?
I just scratched my head.
Oh, so sorry.
That's like the fix-it commercial.
And Alan was going, no, that's not correct. So those are the proposed amendments, and we're just asking that they go to public hearing. And as a part of the discussion there earlier, zoning bylaws are constantly being tightened, and a lot of it comes out of IRAC decisions. Sometimes things can turn on a word, a sentence in the zoning bylaw. So we're just trying to make these improvements so there's less ambiguity in the bylaw. You saw this evening on the previous application, there's a lot of, it's just the planning is very complicated, and no matter how clear you write it, it's not, you're trying to make sure that the bylaw is giving that clarity that is needed for you folks, for council, and the general public. We're hoping that this does it.
And I think that's the key piece, is that for you, it's common language. For legal people, it's common language. For people like us, it's not common language. So it does need to be clear, in my opinion, if you're going to expect people to understand it. Do you have something you want to add?
I have two things.
Okay.
One, if this is proceeding to public consultation, which obviously a council first, I should say, are you going to be putting in the proposed amendment and also show us what it was before the proposed amendment for clarity?
Yeah, they're in the back. It's all strokes.
Text.
Like it's all track change.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. And the other thing is, while we're at it, what about Waterfront Development? Is there an opportunity for that to return to always having a public consultation? We've had some issues with that over the last few years about as of right builds to preserve our waterfront. So could this be under this, or is that a whole other official plan thing?
That would be that'd be a review of the waterfront plan.
Okay, well, I'll write that down for someone.
But it could come up in the public consultation
Yeah.
that waterfront should go back to what it was previously, and that was CDA,
Yeah,
Comprehensive Development Area.
yeah.
That's a significant, like there's, you should, if you're going to do that, you should have a fairly detailed report on why that would be. Plus, there's development rights that have already been established. If you start pulling those rights back, there's potential lawsuits down there because people have bought properties based upon the current zoning, not the old CDA.
Right.
So you have to be very careful with, once you give something, it's very hard to take it back.
Right, right. But I don't think you would do that. I think that you would allow those permits or those applications that already went through to go through.
They're just not transferable to another person.
They don't fall under the new zoning. They would go continue under the waterfront zoning, whatever it was
Right.
under. until they-
These are called basically tiny housekeeping amendments. What you're alluding to is, you're talking about a secondary plan.
But it may come up, I'm just saying, at a
Right,
public
right.
council.
And
But it's something we can be willing to look at.
Right, sure. You can always look at anything,
Yeah.
but you gotta also realize that official plan is going to be incredibly all-consuming of staff and the consultant as that moves through. It's a tremendously good opportunity for staff as well as the council to get into that new plan, our to-do list. And that's where the to-do list would likely show up, to review whatever sections of the city you want to have reviewed, and that would come later.
Well, if Councillor Yankoff and I do this again, we want to be on planning again. We need to be part of that, right, Glenn? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
can I ask a question?
You sure can.
See, Alex, seeing the fee schedule reminded me, we had a number of cases of people building things before they applied for it. Remember that?
Yes, yeah.
And there was some discussion, the penalty was like $50 or something.
It's double a permit, double a building permit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a change?
No, but sometimes it doesn't involve a development permit, or a building permit, but that's the only tool we have.
I think that posed a problem for us a number of times and so we looked at it.
Well, that would come in under the summary conviction bylaw, which is tied to SDRs. We don't have a whole lot of power. That's the problem. Municipalities don't have the power to fine people. Planners would love it.
We can't wait to get that summary conviction going.
Right, but again, the summary conviction still won't give us the powers. The public that we serve think that I can do all kinds of things. Unfortunately, without the ability to fine, which is usually the best correct. Without a fine, you have to go to court. To go to court, it's thousands of dollars for the municipality to recover, like a small amount of money. So a fine is a nice, nobody likes to go around fining, but people will pay attention if you say you're going to be fined.
So I'm gonna, because I know
that's
we
another
have
separate issue.
Thank
so
you.
much for our 2-agenda short meeting. I think you'll never ask me to chair a meeting again because it's 20 after 6 and we still have another item. But could I ask if we have someone that would like to move a motion to recommend to council that this proceeds to a public consultation? Paul moves. Elaine. Yeah, all those in favor of moving this to, okay, thank you. Oof. Yeah. Basil, oh, poor Basil, I am sorry, Basil. Are you okay with moving this to public consultation?
The council.
Council?
Yes, I am.
Okay, sorry. Ellen's got your back.
Thank you.
Are you okay to move this to public consultation?
Oh, I am, yes.
I didn't see your hand go up.
He wants the election sign fixed.
Yes. He wants to be able to put them up tomorrow.
But he wants an amendment. In the case of the mayor, he can put his up 30 days before anybody else.
Exactly.
Torn down the last time.
So we have one more item. His worship has put on more, I think, looking for information on the Hidden Valley subdivision proposal that's out. And I'm gonna let him have no more than 10 minutes.
No, I think you want to also put up your issue too.
Well, it kind of ties in, I think, when we're looking at.
So I'm just trying to think about the format we're having. This is all televised, so
It is.
yeah. But these are private properties, and I just
No.
I'm not sure what we're.
Good point.
Yeah.
But it's a development that was approved by our department, so
Yes, okay.
that doesn't make it public.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason I bring it up, Alex, because I believe Councillor McCabe is having the same issue. Just 1 second. Try to give me one moment. Alan, how do I get over here? Oh, there it is. There it is. Just 1 second. It's right here, Highway 2. Thank you for your patience. And grounds. So this is the proposed area right here. This is the mole farm. Are you familiar with it, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
So all the development is taking place to the east of it, right? And then there's the developers also bought the mole farm.
Where is that now?
So on the Malpeck Road, when you pass the cat dealership, Sherwood Road, and
Oh, yeah.
Malpeck Road, which is
Be on your left.
It's on my left.
Stanley Mullins, right?
Yeah,
Is
so
that
it's
Slick
the
Book?
Stanley Mole Farm. That's, I think it's about 72 acres.
It's on the left going out?
Yes, it's on the east side. So if I just go a little more on the,
Yeah, on the west side, actually.
On the
it's
left.
on, thank you, it is, yeah. And so this is where the development is going, but it's having a huge impact on the existing subdivision. And again, some of the I think established families that moved out there right at the beginning, is it referred to as Highfield Heights?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
They've asked, like, why can't we get some information or have some input into it, into these major developments? Because the proposal is to develop this whole property, 72 acres. Now, I know this corner lot, Chris, belongs to Slick Rhinas, and I believe this other one in the corner of, the northwest corner of Sherwood Road and Lower Malpeck, Lower Malpeck Road also belongs to Slick Rhinas. But Alex, is there anything that we can do that, like, you've heard the call for a traffic study, and you've heard the call to build a roundabout on the Malpeck Road. It's like,
But I guess, you know, the bottom line is that I don't think, you know, Laurel deals with a lot of these subdivisions. I've spoken to her about these, but this approval is no different than lots of other approvals. The only issue is that they would like it to go out to Route 2, which is a controlled access highway.
Which is
the province won't allow that without a lot of heavy duty. If you talk about a traffic study, and then the potential is that possibly could be allowed, but that's not the responsibility of the developer.
No.
The developer's got all the connectivity he needs in there. The subdivision is old, it was all set up that way. The existing subdivision can't get to Route 2. So I know that the public, you know, they see a lot more cars, but these local streets can handle a lot more capacity than they'll never hit full capacity. And because I live downtown, I allude to the fact is I walk on Palm Street. Palm Street is the same type of street that these are out there. It's a local street.
Yeah.
What's on Palm Street? A parking structure. Who's in that? People from all over PEI. It's a busy street. You have residences on it. But that street still functions. It does not hit the thresholds. I know that residents don't like to hear that. I think in some cases, and I don't blame residents, it is disruptive while the subdivision is being built. There's mud, there's noise, there's concrete trucks, there's everything. But unfortunately, the same thing happened when their subdivisions were being built.
Right.
So the fact is that from a technical point of view, this subdivision meets all of the city's requirements, the way that we've handled them in the past. And again, you know, once they're developed, you know, then that's the quiet subdivision, and then those new people complain about as it goes down further down the road that they're dealing with the disruptions.
Right.
But you know, again, I empathize. If Route 2 was not a controlled access highway, it's easier for everybody, better connectivity, you can get up to that roadway. But you know, there are ways to do that, but it's highly complicated because that's a really busy section of the provincial highway, and every time you put a new connection if they're like a light, that slows everything down on that system as well. So.
right. And Alex, I really appreciate what you're saying about it, but I think this planning board has great members on it, and I really appreciate the work that goes into the decisions we make, or you make, and eventually go up to council. But it's just, we all live in a neighborhood, and it's going to happen to our neighborhood. It's just, how do we provide more public information, education, so that people can understand? Yeah, you're right, Alex is right. If I lived in Pond Street and there's a parking garage there with 400 cars and they're not seeing the impact, well, that's the information that we have to transfer. Maybe not using that example,
Right.
but use.
And I just use that example because I live on Pond Street, and even on Pond Street, when I walk it every day, well, I look at it, surprisingly, I look over that intersection, and when I'm on the phone, I look at the window, kind of surprised at the amount of near misses at those four-way stops. But the reality is that, you know, those streets are downtown, are local streets. Now, some of them are busier than others, So we have a hierarchy of streets. We have local, we have collector, which is a collector is to move traffic out to a further subdivision, but they don't live in that general neighborhood, but they allow you to parse off and to get into your local street network. And then you've got the arterial system, which is Route 2. And that's when you get up to an arterial, and there are controlled access points, there's safety involved. So Mr. Adams, who is a professional engineer, who studied traffic engineering, who I defer to because I'm a planner, I like to stay in my lane. My previous comments were on the lawyer components. I mean, I defer to David Hooley or Cox and Palmer for their expertise. But, so we stick to, planners collate the information from others. We don't make all of the final decisions, but we make sure that those decisions have been made. There has been consultation with the provincial traffic engineers on this project, the one that you've alluded to, that Heights, the Highfield Heights subdivision. So it went through the various processes, and to my knowledge, everything was done correctly there. And again, we'll provide accommodate more affordable and needed housing in the city, because these things are being bought up. The minute these subdivisions are created, these lots are being developed.
Yeah, and so this is, and Chris, this is no conflict, because all I'm doing is referring to it. Montgomery, is it Montgomery Heights?
Yes, it is.
So this is barely what's out there now. It's developed significantly since this map, I think, might go back to 250. But there's a whole plan to develop all this area too. So there's going to be a huge impact on our infrastructure. And I know that the province has developed roundabouts to handle the pressures more efficiently. But again, I think people that have lived here for many years, and now their families are staying there, and future families or future generations are staying in the same neighborhood. It's just, I just find...
They would prefer to have better connector roads, so there's different ways to access. And, I know that people in Horseshoe Hills are feeling the effects of the major development with everybody, because we have met the bylaw requirements with Parent Street and Horseshoe, but it's still pretty compacted where the traffic can go. You're still going through, there's a lot that, and we brought that up at the public meeting. There's still some residents that are concerned with the amount of traffic and trucks, and I think you said it right, Alex, it's disruptive to the residents that are established there, for sure.
But I'm not trying to downplay things, but I'm talking about myself. So this lovely building that we work in, the first day that hoarding went up in front of City Hall, I was coming up the street, and I kind of forgot it was a new day, and so I had to get out onto the roadway and get by it. And then so after that, I decided I'm not walking by the front of this building any longer, because it forces you into the street. Right. But the reality is, it is an inconvenience. When we rip up a street and put in new servicing, the merchants downtown, they lose business while the new piece of infrastructure is going in, or the paving is being done. But these are all components of trying to create a good, robust infrastructure, bring development on in a timely manner. We certainly don't. We don't want to, be pushing things over the tops of the residents, but again, the residents that are in those subdivisions had the similar type of approvals. So, we want to be fair and balanced to all of the parties, and plus, to the development community who comes in and says, what are your rules and regulations for subdivision? We tell them the rules and regulations. Somebody came in recently, you'd be shocked at the checks that have to be written to the city to facilitate the procedures on these, and that's real money for somebody. So that's the component of the development process. A planner is always in the middle between respectfully the council, the citizens, the developers. And then people have issues. Back to our previous discussion, you can get into litigation, but
is there collaboration with Public Works and our engineers on all these things on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, there are, but in an ideal world, it would be nice if we had our own traffic engineer. But again, we're a growing community. Scott is
You can't expect Scott as manager of public works to also be the traffic expert for the city to be, I mean, you can only expect people to do so
Right,
much.
right.
So
And
whether we
I'm
have
not
to
here to advocate for
pamper.
Scott. I advocate for the planning department, and you folks have been, very good for us this year as well. But these things are reviewed, and we do, when it's involving a piece of provincial infrastructure, we work very closely with our counterparts at the province. We even call them, they'll say something like, that is 100% your decision because it'll be a part of our infrastructure, but we don't like to be doing something that they say, it would have been nice if you had given us a heads up because it is either impacting a part of our infrastructure. But these are all rules, right? That controlled access, that is a rule, and you can only do certain things on a controlled access highway.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity just to bring it to the attention.
No, and it's always good to get the information. It's nice to be able to have something prepared to give.
And in no way am I condemning the realtors or the developers. I'm just saying that if we could find a better balance in getting the information out, because when excavators and dump trucks arrive into your neighborhood, like, what's going on? Well, it's as of right, we're allowed to do it. Here's the number of lots we're putting in this particular development. Anyway, thank
And I
you.
think it's hard when they've been stubbed for years, right?
Right.
For them to continue on, but you get used to that, and then we need the development so
Yes.
bad right now. There's, you can't buy a lot in West Shirley, or East Shirley, basically.
We had, sorry.
It makes it so hard. I can see both sides of the spectrum, and I really feel bad for the people.
We had a connection in my previous community that I worked in, and it was a long cul-de-sac that had developed for 30 years. And it developed longer than it typically would because it was for future connectivity. When they finally connected that roadway, that went from a sleepy kind of a cul-de-sac to 25,000 cars a day. But the reality is the residents were told from day one there was no secret that it would finally connect. But when that connection is finally made, you can see how critical that connection was to that area of the city. But it took so much other development to bring the two together. But again, I go on that road quite a bit, and I'm on that road, and I just think about prior, it was a sleepy road, 25,000 cars a day.
There's a prime example with that vein going through it. Like, that wouldn't even been looked at to be developed 25, 30 years ago.
What vein, Chris?
Well, we know the waterway going through it, because the lots are going to be on angles and stuff, but now we need it because it's so close to.
Yeah, it's a protected zone. It's a watershed course.
I'm just going to throw out, and this is going to be, if we had some time as maybe as part of the official plan, I don't mean to be, we do have a growth management study which is going to be delivered to council, and you're going to get it's very revealing to me. One is the amount of agricultural land that has been taken out of the system, both inside the city and just outside. Just will never be agricultural land. I mean, we're talking hundreds of acres, so it's disappearing. East Royalty, I'm under no illusion. We did the secondary plan. That's the first thing I did when I came here. We went up and finished the East Royalty master plan. And people just keep telling me they cannot believe how much development. But you've got to run the city a little bit like a bit of a business. And this land is called inventory. Inventory if you're a business. That inventory is being developed very quickly. So what happens when you run out of inventory? You get to your boundaries. So we have to be very efficient when we deal with the new official plan. The mayor's alluded to one of the solutions is densification. A lot of the public don't like densification either. But the fact is, if you don't, you're going to lose your inventory, which means available land. You're going to be pushing it up against those environmental areas. And the fact is that if we just continue on the same old way we've developed, it's a costly way and a costly form of development. There's always going to be people who want to live in single-family dwellings. COVID made them a very attractive type of development, but it doesn't have to be the only type of development. So you'll see like a horizon when we're likely going to start to hit these thresholds where we're pushing out against our boundaries, and we just need to think about the development, the built form inside the city for the next 20 years.
It's a huge change. Saturdays you go to the mall, for God's sake, and you're used to little old Charlottetown, and then now you're I sometimes feel like you're in downtown Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
And you're growling and you're thinking, it takes you 15 minutes to get home, like, that's a long time.
You've got to
And I'm not even that old.
You have to talk to other people from Summerside or Montague, what they talk about when they come to Charlottetown. They literally think it is Toronto.
It kind of feels like that some days.
Right, but no, but their concern is how do you handle the traffic? I mean, we're still Charlotte, it isn't Toronto, but to your point, it's changing quickly. We do have these ring roads that have been put in, and those ring roads they were very timely. They needed to come in right at the time they come in to diffuse that traffic and keep people out of these residential areas, right? You want to push people out of your neighborhood onto a collector road or onto an arterial, if you don't need to be in that neighborhood.
Okay, Rosemary, did you have a question before we wrap it up?
Just in relation to increasing density, how do you, thinking of health and active living, active transportation, but mostly just green space for people, I mean, how do you ensure that there's lots of green space for people and parks for kids and places for people to go, especially if houses are going to be more densely situated?
Well, the irony is the denser the area you live in, the healthier you are. And I'm a little bit of a testament to that. Somebody was teasing me the other day about the price of gas. And I just laughed and said, I don't care about the price of gas because I walk to work. And I'm not trying to be melodramatic, but it's 5 minutes for me to get to work. And my car doesn't move unless I don't need to utilize my vehicle. But if I was living like most people in a lovely neighborhood, you need your car. Yeah, that's an expense you can't get around. But so what happens is when you're living in a denser neighborhood, my son lived in Montreal. I couldn't believe where he lived in downtown Montreal. I'd say I needed paint, something like paint. It was literally out his front door. There's everything at your door, the bigger the center you go in. So the fact is that you walk everywhere because a car then becomes a liability because you have to pay to park it. So then you start moving, you start walking around and you just find that your neighborhood is just easier to get around. If you're out into a low density subdivision, you don't have any sidewalks and then it's harder to move around.
Thank you very much, Alex. Everybody's getting tired, I think, for giggling and being silly. Any more questions? What? Lots of good input, lots of good things we can look at as a committee. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, boys. I think we're all in favor.
There's a couple of extras pizzas out there if you want.
Yeah, mine's in the fridge. And I'm taking Terry's home, I deserve it.